Okay, so this is card breakdowns. We've been doing this for a little while. You can see most of them up on YouTube at the moment. We are just about to wrap them up. We've got a couple of 30-minute segments left. Today we are looking at Combrei, the faction of time and justice. Combrei cards are generally the sort of monastic cards. There are a lot of people who are like sort of scholars and students, all of which really just means that they're studying like martial arts and beating your face in. It's a pretty good set of interesting cards here. A lot of minotaurs, a lot of really like unusual things, and yeah, I think that this is a really, really fun archetype with a really, really slow and powerful, like, just main board control deck that really works out very, very well. So, yeah, let's go ahead and talk about the cards, shall we? We got the banners and the seats. I don't think we really need to do too much about them. Combrei banners and seats are really not any different from banners or seats in other decks. You do want to run both of them if you're going to be running some of the big Combrei decks, especially decks with Champion of Progress in them, which you're not going to be running too often. We have a Safe Return. Put one of your units into your hand and give it +1/+1 as a fast spell. This card gets undervalued, I think, quite a bit. It is sort of card disadvantage in that if you're safe returning just for the +1/+1 bonus, you're spending a turn basically not doing anything. You can use this to repeat summon effects, however, and to protect your units from any sort of spell. This is, I think, generally a better card than Protect in many instances. And the reason for that is that it can cause you to repeat certain effects and repeat certain summon effects and just get a really decent amount of stuff. It's not that it costs you card advantage so much that it costs you tempo. And the fact that, like, basically if your opponent casts a removal spell and you safe return, that unit doesn't persist on the board is actually pretty meaningful. However, for cards like Order of the Spire, for Marshal Ironthorn, for anything with a big summon effect, safe return can actually be a better option than Protect. And you should weigh it against Protect in most instances. See if there's any synergy with Safe Return in your deck, because in particular it's very good with Copper Conduit, the card that has Power Surge and gets a bunch of bonuses from that. There are a lot of things that you can Safe Return that will actually be really, really scary. You can use it to refresh killers, you can use it to refresh Aegises or Aegises, you can use it to refresh Power Surges and just generally defend things. The +1/+1 does matter on certain units. It is a decent draft card if you're playing cards like Karmic Guardian or Order of the Spire. If you have the right types of summon effects, it can be pretty okay. It does obviously cost you card advantage, so you want to be careful with it, but typically people are going to be throwing removal spells at your face, and having a 1-cost spell that actually protects your unit can be very useful. I think this card gets undervalued in both draft and ranked, and it's reasonably strong even though it does impose some amount of card disadvantage, and it never is more than a 1-for-1. Still, can be a crazy trick that really gets you out of a lot of tough situations. So interesting card, really worth it if you're running decks that can protect yourself. Don't use it in decks with lots of weapons, because the weapons do fall off if you put the unit into your hand, so you're not going to get advantage out of that. Awakened Student, Empower +1/+1. Now, this card is one of the better 2-drops in the game. It is really, really good at being sort of aggressive. Combrei decks often don't want to be aggressive, but even the ones that want to be slow sometimes run this card, because being this low to the ground and also having like a big like 6/6 unit later can be really, really beneficial. This card will always get to be tougher than it already is. It's pretty hard to kill it in any sort of way that's efficient in comparison to just like torching it as you normally would, so you don't really feel like you've lost a lot if you play Awakened Student down on 2 and it dies to something. I think that you should generally try to play this on 2. I used to say that you played this as a 3-drop just so that you could get it up to 4 a little bit faster, but in reality it's going to die to most of the same things that you're going to die to on 2 that you would die to on 3. The only exception is Lightning Storm. If you see blue in your opponent's hand, then you might want to consider playing this on turn 3 so that you can play a 2-drop, play a power, and then get a 3-drop before your opponent can respond to or remove it. But in general, it's just easier to play it on 2 and be really aggressive with it. This card works very well in aggressive Combrei decks with Stand Together. It's a bomb draft common. Like, it's just a really, really good card to fill your deck with in draft. You can get some pretty easy 7-0s if you can get a bunch of these, but yeah, it's a nuts card in draft, and very, very hard to deal with. It isn't a card that's going to necessarily win the game all on its own, but it's certainly going to make ardent strides towards that particular aspect. It does have some pretty decent artwork, I would say. Yeah, you know, like I really like how all of the time cards are like mind over body, and this card actually, its voice line is mind over body, which, I mean, come on, dude. Just I understand like the whole mind over body concept, but also like clearly you are using your mind to influence your body. That's amusing to me. I think that's really funny that like you have this sort of knowledge is the key to power theme in time, and what that generally translates into is a bunch of people who are generally using their knowledge to just build themselves into war machines. So life hacks. All right, Desert Marshal. Ambush. Summon, you may silence another unit. This card is really quite bananas. It's very good in both ranked and draft. It's a ranked staple just because of that ability to silence another unit, as well as the fact that it is an ambush unit. There's some really interesting quirks to this card. If you use it as an ambush unit in front of a unit, not a relic weapon, mind you, it will block relic weapons no matter what. But if you use it in front of a unit and you choose to silence the unit, your opponent can torch the unit in response, and it won't actually get a chance to block with ambush because the summon effect will happen first. So your opponent will get a chance to respond to the summon effect, and then the ambush doesn't block the unit. Kind of like a weird, interesting like interaction where it's the only ambush unit that won't block a unit, even if there's a removal spell on the board. Other ambush units will block the unit, and then a removal spell will kill them, but they'll still be blocking the unit. But Desert Marshal is a card that you can use to, you can actually have like a sort of disadvantage there. Of course, the way that you respond to that disadvantage is just choosing not to target anything with Desert Marshal. If you're silencing your own unit, or if you're not silencing anything, then you can still get the ambush off. So just one of those weird Desert Marshal tricks, something to be aware of. Desert Marshal is very powerful in respect to just basically, it can often get two removals at the same time. It can get the silence effect, which is about a half a card of removal, and it can also get the ambush effect, which will kill a 2-drop. Pretty effective in that respect. The 1 health does matter. It is pretty easy to kill with Vara's Favor and snowballs and other things. It is a meaningful nerf to this card that it is slightly less healthy than it used to be. It used to be a 2/2, but this card was just a crazy staple before that, and it's still a crazy staple now. You run 4 of these in most of your big control decks. You run them in some aggressive decks too, because you can use that ambush effect offensively as well. So Desert Marshal's pretty fun. Combrei Emissary, 2/2. You can play an additional power card each turn. This is an interesting ramp effect. Very often I find that if you were playing Combrei Emissary, you won't have another power card to play on each turn, so you really have to sort of like make sure that you have the right types of synergies with this deck. That typically means a lot of power, a lot of seek effects. In particular, the card Find the Way is extremely important, and Find the Way is a very, very powerful card in general in time, so don't undervalue that card, especially with Combrei Emissary. This card is quite good at ramping. It's terrible in draft because you just usually don't want to ramp in draft. Like, it's not very valuable to you to just play out extra power for the most part. There are a couple of sort of exceptions, but I think the main issue with Combrei Emissary is that he very often needs to be down for more than one turn to get any sort of value out of him. There are basically instances where he acts as a secret pages and can be better than a secret pages, so I do recommend him in some Boudic style decks where you're just trying to sort of buff up your units, but I don't really like him as a draft card. I think in ranked he's very, very specifically oriented to a certain type of deck that isn't very popular right now and isn't really all that good, and also has a lot of other options with Combrei Emissary. So I'm not terribly psyched about this card, but you can run it if you like. Can't remember if this is a Jex Bounty card. Let's go ahead and... It actually might not even be in draft. How do I do that? Jex Bounty. Okay, Combrei Emissary is a Jex Bounty card. It is not in draft, so yeah. It's just an okay ranked card, one of the weaker Jex Bounty cards. Combrei Healer, 2/2, summon, you and a unit each get +3 health. This card is pretty rad. Overall, there's a lot of good things about it. You can get the... So it's got a really good stat line. A 2/5 is quite bananas for a defensive unit. The extra health is very, very meaningful and is the difference between life and death in a lot of sort of aggro burn archetypes. And those same aggro burn archetypes are going to be really, really sad about Combrei Healer because Combrei Healer is going to be standing in the way of most of their big units. It's not going to be completely amazing for stalling all aggro decks, but it does do a very good job of stalling aggro decks. and your opponent is generally forced to deal with this card if he wants to push through. As a result, Combrei Healer is a premier card for defending your control archetypes. It's a very strong card in draft for the same reason. Like, it's just got a lot of stats and a lot of bonuses, and it's something that you can equip and be kind of aggressive with in draft, which is really nice because it has so much health, and it's dual colored, which means it's fairly hard to kill. This is a good card to put Boudic Staffs on, to stand together, to just basically stick on the board and continue to dominate board presence. Yeah, it's a pretty good card for all of those reasons. I would say this is a ranked staple, and it's very, very good. You should definitely be running it in anything that you want to get to an 8-drop with. Knight Chancellor Seraph. Overwhelm. Pay 8 and exhaust Seraph to play a random time or justice unit and double its strength and toughness. So Knight Chancellor Seraph has a lot of good things going for it. First off, it's got a pretty good stat line. 3-4 Overwhelm means that it's not vulnerable to most things that you would expect a 3-drop to be vulnerable to. It doesn't die to Torch, it does die to Suffocate, it does not die to Vanquish. So yeah, overall, like, it's just got a really decent setup, and being dual colored means it's also blanking Annihilate. That means that Seraph tends to stick around on the board for a lot longer than you would expect her to. Her ability is one of the strongest in the game for your late game presence and just basically improving your position. Now that she exhausts to do that, she does like basically provide consistent card advantage but not great extra board advantage on the first couple of turns that she's played. However, in any situation where you are basically just continually going into stall mode, Seraph is going to win you the game. That 8 and exhaust to play a random time or justice unit almost always gets something great. It can occasionally get like a 2-2 Initiative of the Sands or a 0-0 Idol of Destrin, which is always fun. But more often than not, it's also going to pick up things like Ikaria or any sort of big flyer or Curiox the Collector. There are a lot of really, really good cards that Seraph can hit, and she has better hits with... she has better 8-drop hits than she has poor 8-drop hits, I would say. There are a lot of good things that you can hit with Seraph. She's crazy solid, one of the stronger legendaries, and a very, very good addition to Combrei. That exhaust ability is really fun. It's good to play around. I think this card is really, really well designed. Like, she just encourages not only a pretty good staple archetype for Combrei, like it's just a really good card to run in Combrei, but it also is a card that encourages really dynamic play in the late game. And there are times when you're going to want to remove Seraph, there are times when you're going to want to ignore Seraph, and when you ignore Seraph, that presents really interesting situations where you have a lot of fun gameplay around her, and you're trying to figure out how to deal with like whatever particular thing that Seraph hits. And sometimes Seraph hits just like really amazing things that win you the game, but like I don't think that that is an element of randomness in Eternal that is bad. Like, this is something where clearly she's very well signposted ahead of time. You can hit her on 11, which is always nice, but it's one of those things where the randomness is just really, really healthy for the game and does a lot of cool things in the late game. I really like this card. It is a bomb in draft, and it is a bomb in ranked. It is just a really, really good card in one of your first crafts in Combrei, as well as one of your first craft legendaries, if you're kind of a spiky character. Alright, Stand Together. Your units get +1/+1 in Aegis as a fast spell. So this card, of course, is the ultimate answer to a harsh rule. Your opponent harsh rules your board, you stand together, and the game is usually over because your opponent just killed all of his own units, and your units all just got a slight buff. So Stand Together is a really, really good card in both aggressive Combrei and some of the slower Combrei decks that are more defensive. In the slower Combrei decks, it's going to be like a 1 to 2 of. Basically, just you run 1 or 2 of these just so that you can, when you're in a mirror match, win the Harsh Rule duel. In an aggressive deck, you run this with tokens and with Awakened Students and with Combrei Healers, and you just make all of your units really, really big on any one particular turn. You have to be careful with Stand Together and actually use it in many situations. People hold on to Stand Together a little bit too much, and there is a pretty strong case for using it at the end of a turn when you don't have anything else to do. I think that generally giving the Aegis to your unit is often better than having the surprise, because that +1/+1 bonus is very relevant, and it still blanks Harsh Rule if you do that. You can, of course, be killed by a torch in response to a Stand Together, so there are times when you want to sort of hold on to it and wait for your opponent to cast a spell, but that sort of like metagame is one of the things that makes Stand Together a really interesting card. Overall, this card's very strong. I would recommend it in both ranked and draft. I think it's pretty good in both of those situations. It's a good trick that is almost always reliable in draft, and in ranked it is just a really bomb card against Harsh Rule and other board sweepers. So, really strong card. Boudic Staff, +3/+3. Empower, if you have 8 or more maximum power, you get to draw Boudic Staff from the void. So on turn 7, if you play a power, you can get Boudic Staff back as a +3/+3. Note that if a unit gets silenced, Boudic Staff gets silenced as well, so you can't get Boudic Staff back after that. That is one of the primary weaknesses of this card, and one of the reasons why it's not used in a lot of ranked decks, because silences are pretty common, and there are a lot of ways to sort of get rid of it. Also, getting to 8 power usually means that you're doing a lot of cooler things, so Boudic Staff often doesn't see as much ranked play as a result, but it's still pretty good in a lot of aggressive decks. Boudic Staff is a good stat line for a 3-drop unit, like it gives you enough of a bonus to defend any unit from a torch, as well as just push a lot of damage and actually pressure. So I think it's usually always worth it in draft. It is a very, very solid weapon, and if you are in Combrei, it's very worth it in those colors. In ranked, you use it with more aggressive decks that are more focused on things like Karmic Guardian, or trying to stay low to the ground, but also be really aggressive with cards like Combrei Healer and Awakened Student. So yeah, has very good synergy with the rest of Combrei, is mostly an above average card, but not amazing. Copper Hall Elite, 4/4 Overwhelm Aegis. So this card's really interesting. It has all of the right things to be good, but often ends up falling a little short. The main reason for that is that Sandstorm Titan is a real card. Copper Hall Elite is much harder to kill than Sandstorm Titan, but often doesn't pressure enough. That 4 damage is a little bit light for a 4-drop. It is pretty unlikely to be useful unless you can get a weapon on it, or get like a Xenon Obelisk down, or do something else to sort of support Copper Hall Elite. However, it's a really solid card for setting up things like Divining Rod, for setting up Boudic Staff in particular, and for basically just engaging with a lot of different weapons and relics and other interesting archetypes. Copper Hall Elite has really good synergy with most of those cards. Its main flaw is that it is a 4-drop unit in time that isn't a Sandstorm Titan. So I don't think that's too big of a flaw. It is definitely worth playing in some decks, and sometimes it's actually a reasonable substitute for Sandstorm Titan. Pretty good choice if you're in Combrei and you don't have Titans. Pretty good choice if you're in Combrei and you're looking for something that will live a little bit longer than Titan. Fairly good card for that. I would say in draft it is pretty average, actually. It is very hard to kill, so if you can get weapons on it, it's just amazing. Like, that overwhelm ability is actually quite good. It is basically the equivalent of evasion if you can get weapons on it, so it just makes it into a huge bomb. Has very good synergies with most things. I would pick this very highly in draft, especially if you have weapons, but it might not win the game for you. Enlightened Stranger, empower all strangers, get +1/+1. The best value stranger that you can get, and therefore a very, very strong draft card. Makes strangers just a really, really good strategy in draft. It's also in the same colors as Determined Stranger, another extremely good stranger, and that makes strangers pretty viable in Combrei. But ranked Combrei strangers just isn't really a real deck yet. We're going to wait and see if there's a big stranger coming out that's going to make strangers more worth it. As it is, Enlightened Stranger is a little bit slow and a little bit weak, so I wouldn't really recommend it in a ranked deck. But as a draft card, pure bomb, probably worth picking up, especially if you're picking up the fixing strangers, which you should be doing. Karmic Guardian, Flying Lifesteal Endurance, 1/4. This card is an absolute bomb in draft because there's so many different ways to give it extra bonuses. If you don't have any way to give it an extra bonus, it won't do much for you in draft, but you're probably playing something. Stand Together, Safe Return, Boudic Staff, Crown Watch Longsword, Xenon Obelisk, Crown Watch Cavalry, anything with Warcry, Inspire. There's so many ways to make Karmic Guardian even just slightly bigger, and an even slightly bigger Karmic Guardian is just a card that's going to very slowly and very effectively win you a draft game. In ranked, this card is okay in some flight school decks that are using Boudic Staff. It's okay if you're using some like sort of other interesting options. I actually really like the art on this card. It's pretty neat. It looks really cool in like the flippy hair as well. I think there's some decent things going on there. Yeah, so like the card is very, very good at just sort of defending you, defending your health total, attacking for a bunch of damage, being able to clear flyers out of the board. All of that stuff is amazing in draft, and it's well worth picking up. Great Parliament, play a 4/4 owl with flying for every 4 maximum power you have. This is a really, really fun card for Combrei in general. It is usually a good alternative to Sandstorm Titan, just because a 4/4 is just not a bad stat line. Similar to that Minotaur Elite, like having a 4/4 on 4 is really not that bad a thing. The main thing about it is that, however, at 8 it becomes 2 4/4 owls with flying, and that is really, really good. At 12 it becomes 3 4/4 owls with flying, and that is basically impossible to deal with without a harsh roll. So yeah, if you're playing a deck that can get up to 12, then Great Parliament is a really, really strong card for you. Fortunately, there's a lot of different Combrei archetypes that can get up to 12. The main card that this card is almost always played with is Marshal Ironthorn. You generally want to play Marshal Ironthorn before you play a Great Parliament, but if you have them both, they should go in decks together, and they do really well in ranked. In draft, I think this card is probably a bomb. A 4/4 owl for 4 is just actually super good in draft, and if you can get 2, that's fine, but don't hold on to it by any means. Just play that thing, get your owl, and kill your opponent with it. It's a really, really good legendary in draft. Reality Warden, 7/7, cards can't leave the enemy void. The influence requirement on this is pretty deep, but at 5 cost, double time, double justice is actually a little bit easier to hit. I really don't like a lot of the 4 cost double influence cards. They're actually pretty hard to hit, and they require you to be very, very well invested in your deck. At 5, Reality Warden is pretty solidly playable. Reality Warden is interesting because it's bigger than most of the time and justice cards and most of the big cards in general. Reality Warden is just huge, and that body is actually really quite relevant. The cards can't leave the enemy void effect is actually pretty good as well. One of the things that this card really shines at is shutting down armory decks, because armory decks have only one answer to Reality Warden, which is Vanquish. Most of their relic weapons only deal 6 damage, and they really like to play this card called Smuggler's Stash, which they use to pull a bunch of cards out of the enemy void. If you Smuggler's Stash with a Reality Warden down, you don't get anything. So Reality Warden is a very solid card against the Armory archetype. It's actually a pretty solid Combrei include, and you should consider it in some aggressive Combrei decks. In draft, this card is obviously a bomb. The cards can't leave the enemy void effect is actually relevant against Haunting Scream and Dark Return. You can blank anything in draft in addition to putting down a big 7/7 unit. I think that's pretty well worth it. So yeah, fun legendary in draft. Stronghold's Visage. At the start of your turn, you gain 1 health and 1 armor. This is 2 health a turn, and 2 health a turn is actually pretty meaningful. This card was bananas at 4. At 5, it's a little bit slow and really needs to be in the right type of control deck. I think it's still well worth it in draft. That amount of health and life is actually like really relevant, and it can buff your weapons in a way that's really beneficial as well. You do kind of have to build around Stronghold's Visage, but this card will kind of spiral out of control in draft if you let it, and if you build the deck around it. I wouldn't say it's an amazing card. Again, it's something that you sort of pick up if you have like a more defensive tuned deck. But yeah, in ranked, you generally play this in control. You play it with Sword of the Sky King and other cards that can really benefit from that extra armor. But it's not quite as good as Throne Warden for most situations. It's really more of a long game card that's going to gain you a ton of health over the course of a really, really long game. So Time Primal Justice decks really like this card, but it's not amazing, and there's a lot of good 5-drops that can generally alternate with it. Works well with Staff of Stories. Champion of Progress. 6 time influence +6/+6, 6 justice influence +6/+6. A 6/6 for 6, which means that it is a, you know, reasonably big dude that's pretty hard to kill because it's dual colored. Yeah, so as things, let's see here. Kenner asking why not play Water of Life instead. You can play Water of Life in draft. It's not an amazing thing, but it's not bad. All right, so Champion of Progress, yeah. We got 6/6, 6 times 6 justice. This card becomes extremely large very quickly in some setups, but it's pretty hard to actually get those influence requirements and make it big. And the main problem with it in ranked is that most of the time it is always already big enough, and being a 12/12 doesn't influence you all that much. I really like this card with Healer's Cloak. I like this card if you can actually get the influence requirements put together. I think I like this card pretty well in draft. Having a 12/12, which you often will get, is decent at 6, but it's not amazing by any metric. It's really pretty middle of the road, and it's probably the weakest of the champions. But it's so much fun to have an 18/18. All right, Minotaur Ambassador. Summon, play a Time Sigil and a Justice Sigil from your deck. For 6, a 3/5. This card is actually playable in several ranked decks. The one that's really solid right now is an Lin deck, where you use Minotaur Ambassador to quickly ramp yourself to 8. This card works well with Marshal Ironthorn in that respect. It works well with cards like Xenon Obelisk. Being at 8 is actually pretty relevant, so having a card that instantly gets you to 8 at turn 6 is actually pretty cool. I think this card tends to go a little bit undervalued in ranked. It is a more powerful effect than you would expect. The body is pretty unreasonable, and that's the reason why it's not played very much in ranked. A 3/5 just isn't very interesting. But it has some play in certain token type decks that really want to hit like a Xenon Obelisk very fast, or certain decks that want to hit like a very specific 8-drop. And yeah, the card, the ranked deck that currently runs this is an Lin deck, which will definitely be featuring in a brew sometime soon. Pretty cool card in general, not amazing in draft, not great in ranked unless you have a very specific plan for it. But yeah, I like it. It's pretty fun. Cool shades too. Vatican Temple Speaker. I'm pretty down on this card. Triple time, triple justice. Power and toughness equal to your maximum power, which is to say strength and health equal to your maximum power, and your power cards have destiny. Vatican Temple Speaker is really cool if you can play it down with a Seek power. So you play it for 7, you Seek power, and then you get a power, and that card has destiny, so you draw a new card. That's a good way to get value out of Vatican Temple Speaker. Most of the time, if you play Vatican Temple Speaker down on 7, it's going to get killed, because it's pretty easy to kill in a lot of different ways. It can be killed by quite a few different things that just deal damage to it, or can be killed by death strikes and other options, but the main thing that kills it is silence, and if you silence this card, it becomes a 0/0 and dies instantly. That makes Vatican Temple Speaker a little bit weak and ranked in my estimation. There are certainly decks that run around it and can do like really crazy Voda combos. The main problem with that is that it's more of a win more strategy. I think more power to you if you want to do Voda combo. It's a really, really fun deck, and it's well worth building. So yeah, as a ranked card, I think this card is pretty decent. This card can be a draft bomb, just because having no power draws ever be bad is actually pretty decent. But like, yeah, like same sort of general risk. It can be silenced and killed, but it's not too bad of a deal if it does get silenced and killed in draft. I think in general this card is definitely well worth playing in draft. And yeah, in ranked, there's a lot of decks you can build around it. The main cool thing about it is that you can do Voda combos, which are cards that use giving your power cards destiny, along with cards like Taller, who give your units destiny. Vatican Temple Speaker is pretty cool in those respects. Deep influence requirements, requires you to be pretty heavy in Combrei already, and very vulnerable. Probably one of the weaker Combrei cards, and probably one of the weaker Combrei legendaries, but fun in specific decks. Okay, that leaves one more, and it's actually one of my favorites, A New Tomorrow. Play the top 10 power from your deck depleted. I think this card is stronger than Vatican. I really do. But yeah, no, it's not much stronger than Vatican. It's not really amazing by any metric. So the thing about this card is that it just basically turns your late game into an instant awesomeness fest. Like, it gets you to the point where you have 20 power. At 20 power, you can play Marshal Ironthorn and Ultimate with him and just get amazing amounts of value out of that. You can play Great Parliament and basically just get 6 owls. Is it 20? It's 20 divided by 4, so it's 5 owls. At the very, very least. You can play Seraph and instantly ultimate with her. Basically, all of that's really, really good, and you're often doing a lot of that in Combrei anyways. And then the other thing about it is that if you play the top 10 power of your deck depleted, you never draw power again. You just don't draw power, you draw nothing but gas. There are some weaknesses to that particular strategy. Of course, you can pick up Seek Power, or Amber Acolytes, or Taller's Favored, or Find the Way. There are a lot of different cards that are helping you to get to New Tomorrow that you will still draw after you play New Tomorrow. But overall, this card does improve your late game in a way that's really quite beneficial to slower control decks and slower Combrei decks. The question is, are you a slow enough Combrei deck? Because, you have to be a pretty slow Combrei deck to play New Tomorrow, and if you're not that slow, then you probably don't want to run it. This card can be played with Mystic Ascendant to draw yourself a good 10 cards pretty easily. That'll cause you to overdraw and discard a bunch of stuff. It'll also be pretty likely to get you closer to decking yourself. You can't really deck yourself too well with this JoJo, like it's just not a thing that really happens too often, but I would say that it is definitely possible. And the main risk here is that you don't want to play it with like 2 Mystic Ascendants down or a Mystic Ascendant and an Iron Thorn, because you'll draw way too many cards and probably blow yourself up. But overall, New Tomorrow, very, very good way to just get a huge amount of power out of your deck, and then just start drawing Combrei bombs and winning every single matchup after that. It is a significant investment of tempo on turn 10 that will just win you every top deck war. And winning every top deck war, I think, is a worthwhile goal in certain decks, so New Tomorrow can be well worth playing in those decks. In draft, you will probably never play this, but same thing. If you have a really, really, really slow draft deck, New Tomorrow will win you that draft. But yeah, you're not going to have a draft deck that slow. A 10-cost card is just a little bit out of the question for you, so probably not well worth it in draft. But all the same, usually you pick it up for the dust, so might as well try and build a deck around it. You know, have a little fun. That's it for the Combrei cards, guys. So to the YouTube folks, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.